So thank you all for coming. Very happy to see that it has filled up. This is really, really important that everyone in the Hindu community comes together, attends these talks, learns more about the academic field, learns about the representation of Hinduism, and what that means for the long-term survival of Hinduism. Because what happens in academia has spillover effects into the larger community, and those effects can be damaging, they cannot be contained, and therefore an entire way of life is threatened. Now you might say, why should I care, right? Everyone can live their lives as they want. If I want to go to the mall and have a BMW, that's my decision. If I want to adopt Western values, if I want to turn materialist, that's also my decision. There are two answers we could give you. First is there is a loss of epistemic diversity, cultural diversity, that is tragic in itself. When a civilization dies out, even if it's a small tribe somewhere in the forest, when we hear that they built a dam, they flooded the lands, diseases come because these small communities are not exposed to, global pandemics, and they die out. You know what happened in this continent itself with the Native Americans. Enormous and enormous numbers of people were killed out, and it's not just the loss of lives. With them went a whole civilization, a whole way of life. Right? So on that level, it matters what happens in the academic study of Hinduism, because Hinduism is another indigenous culture. It's an ancient culture, and it is one that has been very much under threat for the last 300, 400 years, even further back, 1,000 years back. It is a polytheistic culture. And polytheisms are threatened by monotheisms, because monotheisms do not coexist with polytheism. This is their basic principle. You can't be a monotheism and say we will coexist. So at that level it matters. And then there's one more level it matters at. If we all make the same choice, if we all go the same path, if we're all alike, are we individuals anymore? Right? We're all identical. We could all just be replaced. And if we all make the same choice for the 5-bedroom home, the foreign trips, the flights, the big cars, the SUVs, can the earth sustain us? Can the earth sustain everyone's desire? Some people will have to either voluntarily restrict desire, or there will be a fight, there will be a global conflict, and some people will have their desires not fulfilled through violence. So if some people, for example, 96% of protected lands on this earth are due to 2% of indigenous populations, because their needs are so modest. And the other alternative is a kind of lifestyle which is very damaging to the earth. What does this have to do with academia? In academia, I brought up a picture that I took personally. I'd gone to SOAS in London to attend a conference. And outside this building, you can see it's a School of Oriental and African Studies. It's part of the University of London. You can see Indian students posing. And I just had to take a shot, and luckily in that moment I had my camera, I had my phone, and I could do it. Here we see a certain approach that these Oriental institutes, Oriental professors, recommend towards Hinduism. It should merely be this kind of theatrical posture. It's simply a cultural phenomenon. It is not a way of life. It is not an epistemology, a whole knowledge system. It is not a way of thinking. It's simply a very large and elaborate tika you put on your forehead. And having attended many academic conferences, I can tell you that Indians who participate in Western academia, the tika grows in direct proportion to the number of foreign people in the room. So this is the kind of vision that has been put forward. That Hinduism simply becomes a cultural phenomenon, but it cannot articulate itself. It cannot restate its values. It cannot live its values. It cannot engage in the kind of critical debate that needs to happen with modernity, saying, if everyone follows the modern path, is there not a loss of epistemic diversity? Can the earth sustain us if everyone wants to live the same way? These are important questions that an indigenous, threatened culture brings. Next, the slideshow, please. So let's start with the university as this very place where the next one. Or is there a clicker? Do I move forward? Yeah, okay, great, wonderful. So let me start with a brief bio. Vishwa and I are educated at the New School for Social Research. He was an expert in Greek philosophy and philology. I was an expert in 20th century continental thought, German philosophy. And our education was largely Western. And yet when we started reading Indian texts, after you get tired, if you have a hungry mind, after you go through the whole history of Western philosophy, you see that at the bottom of many, many thinkers, Hegel, Heidegger, Kant, it's still Christianity. Kierkegaard, also Christian. And then you start getting tired because you realize the message is always the same. So we wanted something different. We wanted to develop intellectually, and we started reading Hinduism. And there was a problem. There was immediately a problem because the professor said, you're interested in Hinduism. Might you be Hindutva? Might you be religious? This is bizarre. We have Western educations. We've been raised and been grown up in Germany and the US, and we speak Western languages. We read Greek. We've studied Western thought. So immediately a certain kind of prejudice was starting to manifest. And the more we engage with these people, the more it became apparent there was only one way you could study Hinduism, which is to treat it like a poisonous snake. Even if you're completely westernized and you say, hey, the Mahabharata is a great text, I find wonderful things in Indian poetry, that becomes problematic. Now, can you imagine if Vishwa and I, two academics with PhDs, are subject to this kind of suspicion? Can you imagine what Indian children go through? Someone who does puja in the morning and goes to school or college, can you imagine the kind of suspicion they would be subject to? And that's what we're living with, a threatened indigenous culture that cannot anymore acknowledge itself. So moving forward, that led to a very interesting question. We were told universities are secular. We were told universities are places for creative exploration. We are told universities are places for debate. You bring your ideas, you bring your views, let's have a conversation. Let's think about what this world needs right now. Suddenly we found the university is not very secular, and if you go into the history of the modern research university, it is a Protestant creation. This is the philosopher Hegel, and he's saying, black and white, he's saying our universities and schools are our churches. So there goes the first illusion that the university is some place of dynamic encounter and free thought.
I just want everyone to know who Hegel is. He is the intellectual predecessor to Marx. So as soon as Hegel died, there were left-wing Hegelians and right-wing Hegelians. So the whole language of left and right comes from Hegel. And the whole language of Marxism and property and the language of personal rights as determinative comes from Hegel. The idea that there's nothing beyond the political comes from Hegel. So just so you know, almost all categories of Western categories of debate, even in India today when we say left wing, right wing, and so on, are directly coming from Hegel.
So not only is the university not secular, but as you can see from the quotes from Hegel, I am a Lutheran and through philosophy I've been at once completely confirmed in Lutheranism, Luther himself, and then Max Muller. There is an agenda at the university. It's not, as Vishwa and I personally experienced, it's not this space of open encounter, debate, respect for plurality. In fact, there is an ideology at universities, and that ideology strongly affirms Lutheranism. The study of religions, for example, is a very Protestant purpose, and it begins as a subfield of Christian apologetics, that you go to the other and try to discover their text, what they think, what they believe, as the first step in conversion. That's Max Muller, in fact, confirming that. And the end of that paragraph, if you Google that quote, you will see the end of that paragraph. He says, India's ancient religion can no longer survive, and if Christianity does not step in, whose fault will it be? Institutionally, I just wanted to show you what happens at the American Academy of Religions. This is an affiliate group. It calls itself the Society for Hindu-Christian Studies, but as you can see, the topics are clearly Christian, and a few Indians have been invited to participate to give it this sort of veil that there is some kind of objective secular study. But in fact, under interfaith dialogue or comparative study of religions or comparative theology, there is this ongoing attempt to engage with Hinduism on terms that are favorable to Christianity. So institutionally as well, we have to get rid of this notion that somehow Hinduism is acceptable in any other form except the first picture I showed you, as a kind of cultural affectation. You can be Hindu in sort of wearing a sari, but no more than that. On the inside, you should be completely westernized, modern, secular. Okay, that one Vishwa wanted me to highlight.
That is, Rita Sharma is running the Graduate Theological Union's Hindu theology group, and her topic is glorifying Frank-Tuuli and Christian theology. So there is really no space in America for graduate studies for Hindus that want to study that tradition intellectually. That is a pretty serious problem. All these kids that presented these wonderful papers, should they want to go to graduate school and get a PhD in Hindu studies, they will have to end up playing this game and end up ultimately glorifying the very deconstructionists that they have suffered all their life. They will become bitter. Imagine, I love Hinduism, I go to graduate study to study Hinduism, and I am now forced to deconstruct and degrade Hinduism and in order to show that I am scientific. What will that do to me at the end of my life? 5 years of that? So this is the kind of continuing colonization, the continuing effect of an other that determines our free thought and free action.
Also the book publishing series. I think this is a book series called The Anthropology of, I think, Christianity. And you can see from this book, I won't read the long quote, but academic scholarship has not lost much of its Christian character. And there are book series dedicated to topics such as these. And there is a constant onus on Hinduism to justify itself. Kalyan mentioned some of the issues in terms of which Hinduism is framed. The same issues are not raised. It would be considered distasteful, impolite to ask questions about established academia. So one of the things Vishwa and I did was, we are very interested in German history, so we traced links between German Indology, that's the study of India, as it was done in Germany, and anti-Semitism. And we showed how many German scholars were deeply anti-Semitic, and how there was a collusion between the Indologists and as far as the Reichsministerium, this is Hitler's Ministry of Education, they were sending telegrams to Hitler congratulating him and taking funding from the Nazis. And when we raised this, that was a problem. We could show actual collusion there, and that was a problem. We were attacked for it, and of course the favorite attack, the favorite word to throw out at any Indian who's asking a critical question is Hindutva, Hindutva. So we've had that. It's the trial by fire. They've called us that name, and we still continued our research because facts are facts. Evidence is evidence. And we could document all the problems with their scholarship, and all they could do was hurl out epithets at us which they thought would frighten us off. It did frighten us off. It further convinced us that there is something wrong with the academic study when honest debate, when evidence-based analysis is replaced with a power structure in which Indians can be scared off from asking difficult questions.
just wanted to mention my own family members asked me if I was Hindutva. And I said, what does that mean, Hindutva? I'm an intellectual, I'm a scholar, and I'm a Hindu. I guess you can call me a Hindu, or you can call me a Hindu intellectual, but what does Hindutva mean? You think that I believe in degrading women, or inequality of people, or burning brides? Of course not. Do I think that other religions have a problem? I don't know, I don't care. Why can I not be just a self-affirming Hindu intellectual? Answer: the Hindu community does not create a space for me yet. A space for me to be a Hindu intellectual. Whereas the universities were created by Christianity to provide a space for Christian intellectuals.
Thank you. We're a little tight on time, so I'll take you through some slides very quickly. This is sort of what the discourse on Hinduism looks like. I won't read all of them out. You're fast at reading them. But these are well-known academic scholars, and these are the kinds of claims they can make about Hinduism. Now, if I made some of these claims, people would laugh. They're so patently untrue. There cannot be a reflection of ideas of Hitler on which are Brahmins because the chronology is wrong. Because you cannot prove that link. But these claims can be made because the university provides an institutional basis. It provides legitimacy. When a professor says something, it must be true. Continuing. Same thing happens with Bhakti. Bhakti is actually an inclusive movement. It does not look at caste. It brings all communities in. It is extremely emancipatory. And yet, even Bhakti now gets linked to the Ayodhya violence. Bhakti and Narendra Modi are words that start coming up together. Why is Bhakti bad? Has anyone understood what Bhakti is? Have they studied Bhakti? Have they read Bhakti philosophy? No. But Bhakti could be linked with Modi. And that becomes enough of a reason to turn the lens of suspicion. Now, I'm not here to speak up for Modi, and I'm not here to even say Bhakti is something you should do. It's up to every individual how much of a bhakta he is. But what I am here to point out is that the intellectual content of Hinduism is continuously negated. It's put out of operation by framing it politically. So we don't have to think about whether Bhakti is good or inclusive or helps humans. We simply put a millstone around its neck and we take it out of intellectual, as an intellectual threat, we take it out of permission. Once you do that, there's nothing left of Hinduism as an intellectual system, right? The only thing left is either the cultural thing of the first picture I showed you of the dancers in front of Oriental School of Oriental Studies. So those women had Orientalized themselves. The invitation here is to abandon Hinduism as a system of thought and simply Orientalize yourself. And when you Orientalize yourself, you're of course going to be subject to more racism. So it's a win-win for the system. Again, political intervention. So here is John Collier, Professor at Barnard College, stating clearly what India is and what it should be and what it should not be. Now, I don't have a problem with people having political opinions, but when you use an objective scholarly stance to play politics, it becomes problematic, right? The scholar is supposed to be politically neutral. He is supposed to do good research. This is not good research. This is name-calling. This is not based with notes or evidence or knowledge of the primary text, but it is political intervention. So what we see in academia is questions of research and scientific objectivity have been abandoned, and instead academics are justifying their salary with something called oversight. If it's not for our oversight over Indians, what would happen? What would the Hindus do? Well, A, you're not trained in political science. We're talking about South Asian studies or Sanskrit studies or Hindu studies. You're not trained in political science. 2, you have to decide whether you want to be within a neutral, objective university space or you want to be a political agitator, a political activist. Those are 2 different jobs. And 3, Even if you grant them that they are needed as overseers of Hinduism, it did not hinder Modi. It did not change electoral politics or electoral calculus in India. So even from that perspective, the academics failed. They said, pay us these salaries, we'll come to their salaries in a moment, and we will stop the rise of Hindutva. They failed. I suggest we ask for our money back. So here are the salaries. We can see how high they are. These are extraordinary amounts of taxpayer funding for people who are not presenting a culture as a living, valid intellectual system. They are not teaching you. I learned more about Hinduism here from some of the children's papers than I have at the American Academy of Religions, where academics are giving papers about Hinduism. So they're not conveying the content, the intellectual content of Hinduism. They're being paid for that oversight function. They're being paid to make tenuous associations and say, ooh, Hindutva, ooh, it could all be coming down to Modi. And they, of course, have an ideological stranglehold. Anyone who challenges this, I gave you the example of Vishwa and me, when we raise these problems, when we ask questions about anti-Semitism in Indology, the first accusation was, you must be Hindutva. You see how the field has been constructed. It isn't just balkanized, it has been gerrymandered in such a way that no one can come in, no one can get a professorship, no one can do teaching and research at the university unless they play along with this game. This quote is by Vinay Lal at UCLA, you just saw his salary. And he's saying, academia is such a ringed fence. Now take this quote, I hope you've all had time to read the quote. Yes? Okay. Take that quote and turn it around. How is it possible that within the UC system, the largest public university system in the United States, a place, California, a place of such fervent debate and so many new ideas and innovations, how is it possible you could not find one dissenting opinion at the university? How is that even possible? Right? Isn't this the very definition of ideological conformity? You could imagine Marx or Lenin making a statement like that, saying in all of Russia you will not find one person who says otherwise. And yet we have the same thing in universities, which are supposed to be hotbeds of intellectual foment and intellectual debate. Fortunately, there is an alternative to this paradigm. It's called the Mahabharata. In the Mahabharata, Vyasa already created a university for India. There's a curriculum, there's an order of books that you have to read. It explains specific aspects of Dharma in a specific order until it finally culminates in Moksha Dharma. It has departments. So the Mahabharata is not just restricted to a text. It gives Indian dance traditions, it gives performance traditions, it gives theater, it gives drama, it gives the entire field of Indian poetics. So there are sub-departments in which the Mahabharata is coursing through the life of India, reaching people in different ways. You have professors, not highly paid professors like the university today, but professors with a sense of vocation, people with a sense of service. You have study trips, tirthas and temples that will actually, in their iconography, they will tell you stories from the Mahabharata. So even if you're uneducated, illiterate, Vyasa took care of it. He said, the Mahabharata will come to you in the form of stone carvings that will tell you the story so that you can still participate in this educational project. Public speakers, people who went around, they didn't need to be flown internationally on expensive business class or put up in hotels as professors do. They were simply saints who went around spreading the message of bhakti and reaching the common people. And a graduation ceremony, that's the darshana, which is the final, what is the proof that the humanities have worked? Right? We all say humanities, humanities, humanities. In the sciences, in engineering, the proof is very clear to see. Either your experiment works or it doesn't, right? That would be in science. Either the mathematical equation works or it doesn't. Engineering or software, either it helps humanity or it doesn't. In medicine, either you cure someone or you don't. What is the criterion? What is the graduation test for the humanities? We've not established a standard. We've not asked the question, what is it that the humanities are supposed to achieve? Now, prior to modernity, the Catholic University actually had a very simple or similar situation where the study of the lower disciplines prepared you for the higher discipline of theology, which would culminate in gnosis theo, knowledge of God. That was the end of your education. We have replaced that. In modernity, we have nothing analogous. The only way you know your education is working is big salary, you're part of this elite club of professors, and you're exercising oversight over the natives, and you're fomenting political disturbances. That's the game you're playing. That's why you get a PhD. We have a different model here. Vyasa is more similar to the Catholic notion of gnosis theo, where he says, look, the only way you know the Mahabharata works is when you have the full vision of Narayana. This happens, by the way, at the end of the Shanti Parvan, which is one of the concluding points of the Mahabharata. That university has educated millions. If even today you do not see violence breaking out in India, if even through colonization, enormous economic deprivation, starvation, you did not see this kind of violence breaking out. Injustice and inequality are present everywhere in India today. And yet it is the knowledge of dharma, the knowledge of that through doing your actions, through being a better person, you can improve your lot in life, that keeps India from having random violence breaking out. That system is, granted, I am not ignorant, I know some of the news information. That system is breaking down and violence is rising. But isn't violence rising in proportion to materialism? Isn't it rising in proportion to egocentricity? Isn't it rising in proportion to the kind of suspicion and distrust that academics have sown? So the question is not whether modernity will suddenly cure the ills of India. It's whether Hinduism has not for a long time been aware of these things, been aware of the potential for violence. So here you see a different educational program. Dharma, Artha and Kama I mentioned right at the beginning of the Mahabharata. These are essentials everyone needs to know. It trained people in Karma Yoga and Loka Sangra. We had a wonderful first paper which started with the question of should Hindus be charitable or not. The presupposition or the prejudice is that we lack a tradition of giving. But in fact, Hinduism had a very strong notion of Loka Sangraha, that you have to work to uplift the world. You have to do good things for society. You have to uplift your community. And that was taught to people, that you work for the greater good. You give away, you work and you accumulate wealth only in order to give it away. We have so many examples of sages at the end of their lives, they gave away everything. Because in the end, we have the example, you all know the story of sage Dadichi. He could give away his bones. This is the kind of giving, this is the kind of service that Hinduism teaches. And it provides, of course, bhakti, happiness here, knowledge of your ultimate destiny from which happiness flows, and moksha, final liberation. Now, you would say, if there was this educational system, why are we still looking to start a university? Why is Kalyan trying to start a new initiative? Because this knowledge needs to be preserved and protected within an intellectual place. Listening to the students today, I can tell you, I'll address you directly, you have two destinies. You can either study chemistry, engineering, computer technology, IT, and be very successful and be appreciated for who you are, and you'll have colleagues who will appreciate the fact that you're Indian, that you're Hindu, and they'll want to know more about you. Or you can go into academia, where you will have to become like those dancers. You'll be shorn of any kind of self-respect, sense of self-worth, and your Hinduism will simply be a cultural artifact that you will poke at and you will try and study. There is not a space within academia. And of course, Indians have been successful in the Bay Area. They've been successful in Google and in Microsoft. But without people to also enter academia and raise these problems, give you this kind of succinct presentation of the kind of cultural genocide that is in operation, that genocide cannot be stopped. Vishwa and I are two people who, through extraordinary circumstances, ordinary people through extraordinary circumstances, learned about these things. But most of you would not have learned about these things if you had not come here today. We learned that in academia there is no space. Forget about being a Hindu. There's no space to read a Hindu text with a minimum of charity. You cannot read a Hindu text and say, just as an intellectual, just as a Westerner maybe, I find this text fascinating. That becomes a problem. This is sort of my summation slide, or I have one more. Conquest and colonization have robbed India of an intellectual space. They've robbed India of the financial means, the political support, and the institutional space to continue the restatement, the ongoing enrichment of Hindu thought. There are few places that do it. There is a school in Kumbakonam that still teaches the Vedic tradition to young students, very young students, as young as 8 or 7 go there, and they learn to be priests. And that school has continued for something like 460 years, through wars and through conquest. Whenever there was an invasion, they picked up and they went to the next town or village and they continued. But on the whole, intellectual space has been lost. All the universities established in India, University of Bombay, University of Calcutta, were on the Western model, teaching Western education. Hindu educational space has declined. You look at newer establishments like Ashoka University north of Delhi. They call themselves liberal arts in a Western model. The program is explicitly not related to any traditional knowledge, and indigenous knowledge systems will die out as a result. As I explained, I won't summarize all of it again. The choices our children face are either going to IT fields and be highly successful, or going to academia, where they will, the only role available to them is to play the role of informant in their own tradition and become. You can also, as an Indian, enjoy that power structure. You can be part of that power structure by maintaining control over other Indians. And that is what academia invites you to do. I showed you the salaries of Indians who have become part of that structure. Scholarship is changing. Vishwa and I have spent 10 years. I wanted to bring you all 3 of our books, and I unfortunately forgot, but one of them is here. Ever since academia threw out this challenge to us that if you like Indian texts, you must somehow be Hindu thought, we have been examining the roots of this prejudice. Why are these texts not to be appreciated? What is the point of keeping a text around if you don't appreciate it? And we've been working significantly on the Mahabharata because it is the founding text of classical Hinduism. And this is only one of 3 books where you can see the amount of work that goes into each of them. I invite you to look at a copy later. And for the first time, they cannot claim the scholarly posture. We have looked at their work in depth. Michael Witzel used to get involved in Hindu issues. He used to mock Indians for sending their children to dance classes and saying, oh, these are these nouveau Indian Americans who want to send their children to dance classes. This was the extent of racism, that if a community wanted to continue its traditions, they were mocked, and they were told they were somehow inauthentic, and the children were mocked for doing it. This person who wanted to maintain the racial status quo to such an extent that he could not even bear the thought of Indians going to a dance class, we took away his PhD. The conclusion of this book is an examination of his PhD, and it shows how many errors he made, how problematic his scholarship is, and he will never speak another word on this matter again. This is possible. You can reappropriate a tradition, you can question their scholarship. So let me show you one more.
The book is available online for free, and that is thanks to the Aasheervada initiative by Kalyan. He made that possible. So he bought the rights, the publication rights to this book, because the publisher charges $200 for that book. And Kalyan has granted he has supported us, and he has made sure that that book will be freely available. This way, nobody can pretend that that book was not in their library, so they can ignore it. All future scholarship has to take that work into account.
Okay, this is my last slide. I'll end with this. The Mahabharata is the basis of classical Hinduism. It's in fact the text that gives us the notion of the eternal Vedas. It gives us the notion of Shruti, because without Smriti, Shruti makes no sense. So by setting itself off as Smriti literature, it creates the very category of Shruti, and it constantly affirms the revelation. It constantly upholds the Vedas. That's what the Mahabharata does vis-a-vis the Vedas. vis-a-vis the Puranas, it is the model for these Puranas which worship specific gods. So it creates a literary model that flows out throughout India, and you have not just the Mahapuranas, but smaller Puranas, Sthala Puranas, Kula Puranas. So an entire literary program has been created of how this message can be spread out. Bhakti itself, Vishwa has written about this, he'll give you a lecture on this. Bhakti itself is created as a philosophical program in the Mahabharata based on a simple logic. If I cannot go up to see Narayana, Narayana must come down to see me. You see how simple that is? So if I am not capable of jnana to ascend, then through grace, the Vigraha must descend to see me. So that when you go to the temple, what you're seeing is not an idol. Please get over this notion of Hinduism as idol worship. What you are seeing in the temple is Narayana. He has come to see you. That is the heart of bhakti. It is the inversion of the logic that we have to make efforts, and it is showing you that grace is flowing freely. It's available at any time. It's a short, I don't know, in Dallas maybe a longer car ride, but it's a short car ride to get grace. And finally, the Mahabharata allows you to give a coherent, cogent account of Hinduism. This is where Western scholars have spent a lot of time trying to break up the Mahabharata and say there was never a text called the Mahabharata. And the only real thing about the Mahabharata is the Aryan invasion, that the war between the Kauravas and Pandavas, it's actually a historical conflict. It's not a Dharma Yuddha, it's not some fantastic thing where gods are playing a role. There are no Hindu gods, or if there are Hindu gods, they were added later. Really, the Mahabharata is about the race conflict between white Aryans and black Dravidians. And that's what you have to hold on to. Unfortunately, that's where many Indians have gone. Whenever Vishwa and I present in India, the first question everyone wants to know is, did the war really happen? Right? A historical war. But that is a Western question that has been imposed. By imposing that question of history, the entire wonderful polytheistic universe where gods are taking sides and there's an enormous battle between the Devasura Yuddha is unfolding, and you are a participant in this Rana Yajna, and you can purify yourself through action and escape, all that gets lost. So the historicization of the Mahabharata becomes a way to historicize Hinduism. When Hinduism is historicized, when you've given it particular dates to particular concepts, then when Indians say it's Sanatana Dharma, then they are mocked for it. Because, hey, academics have shown it's not eternal. We can show your texts were written at this date, your people lived at this date, etc., etc. So with that, I want to end. Vishwa and I have worked very hard, but this would not have been possible without the support of many, many people. Kalyan is one of them. People throughout the Hindu community have supported this work. And we hope you'll read our books, we hope you'll inform yourself about these matters and appreciate why it comes. And having seen students today, I know that the genocide is coming to an end. Thank you.